What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Adventure Outpost for another adventure. In today's adventure, we are doing some ranking, and we are ranking everything that we saw in the month of March of the new movies. Not anything old that I've watched in March, but simply the movies that have come out in theaters and on streaming. And we're not going to waste any time. We're going to dive right into it because I don't want this to be too long of a video. I feel like I've talked about these movies ad nauseum in my weekly reports and in other stuff. So I just want to move on to new stuff. So we're just going to bang these out super quickly and run right through them. And we're going to start with the worst movie that I saw for the month of March. And that is the new Disney Plus streaming movie, Cheaper by the Dozen. It's a movie that doesn't really need to exist. There's simply just something to add content for content's sake on Disney Plus. It seemed like one of those things where they were just like, hey, what property do we have now from Fox that we can make a new movie for to pad out our content? And somebody just ran down the list and said, oh, Cheaper by the Dozen. There hasn't been one of those in a while. Let's make one of those. It adds nothing to the formula. If you've seen the Steve Martin one, if you've seen the original, you know what you're expecting, you know what you're getting into. There really isn't anything new. They try to add a little bit more of a contemporary spin with it because now it's Zach Braff and Gabrielle Union, so it's an interracial couple, so of course they're going to try and put in some more contemporary themes of racism and stuff in there. But for a movie like this, it just seems a little like not the right place for it. I don't know. It's just weird. It's like, 'cause it's like a very just like simple family movie that just has these sprinkles of like dealing with racism in it. It's peculiar. It doesn't work very much many of the times, especially when you'll have like a scene where they're trying to talk about like racial stuff that Gabrielle Union has to go through throughout her life, and then it's coupled with scenes where Zach Braff is dancing like a loser in front of like the entire school. It's just a weird juxtaposition. Up next is the HBO Max movie Moonshot. It is the new movie from Cole Sprouse, where him and another woman sneak aboard a spaceship that's going to Mars so that they can try and link up with their significant others. It is a very by the numbers, cliche ridden sci-fi movie. You know exactly what you're going to get out of it. I know exactly what to expect, all the beats that were going to happen. It's a very just by the numbers movie. It doesn't really leave much for you. Cole Sprouse is fine. There's not really much from the acting. It's just one of those movies. It's another one that kind of feels like content for content's sake, but I guess like this is an original story, so it's not so much just like somebody was like, hey, we need to add content. Somebody had to have been like, this is a movie worth making. But I don't know, when there's just so much to watch, this is one of those movies where it's just like, you really don't want to waste your time with that again or ever go back to it. And that's really what you got to look at a lot of the times when you watch these movies. It's just like, what's the rewatchability factor on it? Like, sure, we're getting more movies than ever, but there's not really a lot of rewatchability in any of these movies. And Moonshot's definitely one of those ones up there where it's like, all right, like, yeah, I guess that was a movie, but I'm never going to fucking watch that movie ever again. So, not really that great. Netflix stakes its claim next in the streaming game where we have the movie Windfall with Jason Segel, Lily Collins, and Jesse Plemons. This is another movie that's just, it doesn't have any idea what it wants to be. The genre is all over the place. There's sometimes where like it wants you to think it's like a thriller, but then there's like some weird comedic aspects in there, and especially with having Jason Segel in there, it doesn't really help to differentiate it from you thinking it's a comedy. It kind of doesn't really know what kind of movie it wants to be, and it really just kind of meanders until you get to that last 15 minutes. But even the last 15 minutes isn't enough to save the rest of this movie. Thankfully, it's only 90 minutes, but they sure make you feel those 90 minutes. The best thing that can be said about this movie is the acting. Lily Collins doesn't really get much to do, but you know, with what she has, she makes do with. Jason Segel, always a pleasure to see on screen. I fucking love that man. I want him in more stuff. I want him to write something again. Come on, Segel, write us another good gem. 5-year engagement for getting Sarah Marshall classics. Give me more. But the star of the movie is easily Jesse Plemons. He gets the best character to play. He's just this douchebag billionaire, and he plays it like he knows exactly what he's in, and he just chews into that scenery. And he's really the reason that makes this 90-minute movie worth watching. So for him alone, I'd say like, sure, give it a shot. But if you're really not into, you're not really knowing what your genres are or anything, like this might be one to avoid. We got another Netflix movie in The Weekend Away, a movie with Leighton Meester where her and her friend go out for a night in Croatia and they get blackout drunk and they have no idea what goes on. And when she wakes up in the morning, her best friend has gone missing, and now it's a race against time for her to figure out just what's going on and what happened to her friend. It's a very cliche, very by the numbers movie. It's a movie you've seen a dozen or so times done to better effect. This movie is pretty much what you would expect when you read the plot description for that. You're like, I've seen that movie before, probably seen it better. But it's not as bad as you would think it would be. It has some moments. It's at least semi-entertaining to make the 90 minutes breeze by. It definitely ended up being better than I expected it, but that's only because I went in with literally the most barest of expectations. Now, Hulu comes into the streaming platform next with our next pick, and that is Deep Water. It is a movie I was so excited to watch, and I was so completely let down by it. It's such a shame because with, Ben Affleck, Ana de Armas, and Adrian Lin behind the camera, you would have thought we would have got some steamy, erotic masterpiece. But it is not that at all. It is rough. It is super. It's insane for a movie that's like an erotic thriller. How boring it can be. It's such a shame because like that's the last thing you want your movie to be. At least if it was bad but entertaining, you'd be like, all right. But it is fucking boring for the most part. It's a movie where it's just the same thing happens over and over and over again, and then it's just over, and you're like, yeah, fucking great. Ana de Armas and Ben Affleck do the best they can with what they have. Ben Affleck is just really just like it looked like they just gave him the direction of just like be just annoyed all the time. So he doesn't really have a lot to do there. At least Ana de Armas gets to go through like she's kind of like an insanely like jealous and wild and free-spirited person. So she gets to go through all these different types of emotions and shit. So at least she gets like a character to kind of play. Ben Affleck doesn't get much other than just look around and then murder people. So it's not a great movie. It was probably my most disappointing movie of March. Hulu strikes again in our next spot. It seems all the streaming movies are right now with Fresh. Now, this is actually where we're getting to the point where it's movies that I actually enjoyed. Now, this movie isn't like the best one out there, but for a B thriller, this one is pretty solid for what you're going to find on streaming. And it's probably the only streaming movie I saw this month that was actually any good. And it's, I forget what's her name? Daisy Jones. There's a hyphen in there that I can't think of, but she plays a woman who dates Sebastian Stan, and it turns out Sebastian Stan kidnaps her because he is a psychotic doctor that takes pieces of flesh off of people and sells them to the highest bidders who are cannibals. So it becomes this like escape movie. It's actually really entertaining. The middle chunk of that movie where she is trying to escape his clutches is actually like really fucking entertaining, and it is a very solid, fun little thriller movie that you can watch. Like that's one of those movies where it's like you're just looking for a Saturday night date movie to watch. That's one that won't leave you wanting more like all the rest of these streaming movies have done. I lied because there is one more streaming movie that actually, no, there's two more streaming movies. Man, I'm all over the place. I don't even know what comes out streaming and in theaters anymore. But this next one drops in from Netflix, and it is The Adam Project. Ryan Reynolds, Zoe Saldana, Jennifer Garner, Mark Ruffalo. It is a sci-fi story about Ryan Reynolds who goes back into the past to try and fix a mistake about the future, and he ends up coming across his 12-year-old self, and the two of them must team up to now try and fix the future. It's a movie that gets by very largely on its cast of characters. Everybody is coming into play. Everyone's having their good meaty chunks of performance to give. The kid is the best part of the movie. He sells playing young Ryan Reynolds so well. Ryan Reynolds, it's really what you're into with his shtick. Sometimes it can get super tiring. I'm one of those people that he's very hit or miss for me. Depending on the movie, his shtick can be either very tiring or it can be very enjoyable. Like Free Guy is super enjoyable, plays into it. This movie is definitely one of the better ones. There are some moments where I was just like groaning and I'm just like, it's just the Ryan Reynolds shtick. But then there's parts where they really let him like act, and he puts on some really good pathos in some scenes where he's dealing with his parents that are really fucking good. And it's one of those things where you're like, can we let this guy act some more? Because he's actually like a really good fucking actor. But it's a very by the numbers sci-fi movie also. I think the biggest thing against it in its favor, at least for me, this is just me personally, is that I absolutely fucking hate the time travel mechanics that they created for this movie. To me, they make absolutely no sense. I don't like them at all, and it seems like they were just mechanics that were created just so that they can tell this story. It is not time travel to me. I just do not agree with it. I don't like it, and that is the biggest misstep for me. But that's a nitpick. The movie still is enjoyable. I think for most people, regular moviegoers that aren't as nitpicky as me, I think will get a lot of enjoyment out of this movie. Up next is the horror porno X. This was a wild fucking ride, this movie. Man, oh man, it was something else. Super enjoyable, a nice throwback to like old slasher style horror movies. What really sold it for me that made it so good was I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it's about they go up to this farm to shoot a porno, and the old people that live there have some really weird fucking shit going on, and people just start dying left and right. And I won't say why all that shit starts happening, but suffice it to say, some crazy shit starts going on. And what I think was really cool about the movie is that it's a commentary on I feel of like women aging and having to deal with that idea that like they won't always be as beautiful or as important and young and vivacious as they are. And it's played expertly by our main character, who plays the young version of her, but then also plays the old woman that's at the farm that starts doing this stuff. So it's like she's seeing the reflection in this old woman, where you see this old woman who was a young dancer who got left behind. Now like her husband doesn't want to have sex with her anymore, doesn't find her beautiful anymore, and she feels that she is just like lost and is not as vivacious or anything as she once was. And then you have the young porno actress who thinks she's going to be a star and is like hot shit and thinks that she's beautiful and will always be beautiful. And there's just that juxtaposition from the two of them that they see like that. And the fact that it's played by the same girl makes it just so fucking awesome. It's a really, really interesting horror movie, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't seen it yet. The Kings have returned, and even though Disney is fucking them over constantly by putting them on Disney Plus, they still put out an absolute banger of a hit, and that is our number 2 pick, which is Turning Red, a fucking just fantastically fun Pixar movie. They are really just firing on all cylinders once again with these incredibly inventive and fun original tales. Turning Red is no different. It is the story of a young girl who is reaching her teenage years, where her body is going to start to change and she's going to start reaching puberty and starting to be interested in boys, and all the hormones are going, and their way to show that as a metaphor, instead of her actually just going through all of the normal things that teenagers go through, her family has a curse where any type of hard emotion that comes out, it releases her inner panda and she turns into a giant red panda. That is such a fun and inventive idea to kind of come in and talk about puberty and girls growing into that age where they're going to start learning about all that stuff and becoming young women. And it's a very clever approach to it. It was a little disappointing seeing all the reviews on it from like just random dudes that were just like, this movie's not for me, so I can't connect to anything, so it's not as good. And it's like, you're a fucking moron. It's like, yeah, sure, like you can't connect to it because you're not a girl that goes through periods, but like you could still remember when you were a teenage boy also going through puberty and like not knowing what you're doing with your body, and all this shit starts changing and all that stuff. Like I still just as easily connected to this movie, even though I am not a girl that goes through periods and shit like that. Like it's just a universal story about a coming of age story of people when they hit puberty and they start going through their changes. So all those like weird reviews that these dudes were doing are just absolute nonsense. Like this movie is fun, it's funny, it's super entertaining. The animation in it is fucking incredible. Pixar are just once again on a complete other level. Like they're just absolutely incredible. And Disney, if you put another one of their fucking movies on Disney Plus, I swear to fucking God, we're gonna hunt you down. We want to see these movies in theaters. The animation in this movie, if it was in theaters, would have been fucking incredible. I wanted to see it on the big screen, and you took it from us, Disney. Stop doing that shit. But there can only be one number one best movie for the month of March, and I think it comes to no surprise for anybody who has seen this movie in the month of March, but it is The Batman. I already did a video way back when you could check out of my thoughts on Batman, so I won't do too much into this movie, but it is a spectacular movie. Easily the best Batman movie we've gotten since The Dark Knight. Robert Pattinson, fantastic as Batman. Paul Dano, fantastic as the Riddler. Everybody in this movie firing on all cylinders. Zoe Kravitz, Jeffrey Wright, Andy Serkis, everyone is just so good. The aesthetic of the movie is phenomenal. Matt Reeves' direction and writing is phenomenal. Everything about this movie, it fires on all cylinders. It was super entertaining, a great movie to see on the big screen. I can't wait till we get closer to the summer where we can get more movies like that, just these big bombastic movies up on the big screen. Hopefully they're able to take the big bombastic nature of blockbusters and couple it with the great writing and smart direction of Matt Reeves' Batman. I don't think many of them will be able to do it, but we can hope. But that is our list for the month of March. Not too many great ones. I think really only 3 or 4 like actually genuinely good movies that I would watch again. I think X, Turning Red, and Batman are the only 3 movies from the month of March that I would actually want to watch again at some point. So not that great of a month with everything that we watched. Hopefully April will be a little bit better. It seems like we should get some good movies in the month of April. May, with the exception of Doctor Strange and Top Gun, looks like a barren wasteland. So it's going to be an interesting summer for sure, but that is months from now. We're still only just getting into the goodness of April. But until the next video, you have been you, I have been me. These are the movies that we love so much. And until next time, adventure on.